Hello guys, welcome back to our React tutorial series. So far we've covered JSX and how React renders elements. But what makes React very powerful? That's a question for you. And if you don't know the answer is components. In this video, you will learn everything about React components, what they are, how they work, and why they are essential for building scalable applications. So what are your key takeaways for these videos? You're going to learn what components are, the type of components. Of course, we'll talk about the functional and the class components. You're going to learn creating and using components. You're going to learn passing data with props, and of course, component composition. So let's dive into what components are. In simple terms, we can say components are reusable building blocks in React that defines a part of the user interface, right? A part of the user interface. Each component has its own structure, logic, and style. So aside the definition, what do we even mean? Look at components as piece of threads, piece of clothes. When a tailor is trying to make a cloth, the tailor will have to cut those clothes into different pieces. We have piece for the collar, we have piece for the sleeves, we have piece for the back, and all of this. So all of these pieces will come together to form a dress. This is what we mean by components, right? Components are building blocks separated that has its own styling, its own logic, but when all these blocks come together, it gives you a complete and a complex web application. So from the structure we have here, we can explain what components are. If you look at this, we have components of a web page, we have the structure, we have the header. Of course, the header is the header everywhere. We have the navigation bar, we have the main component, we have the sidebar, and we have the footer. So let's just assume this is our web page, right? Where we have the header, where we have the footer, where we have the sidebar, and of course we have the main application here. So our header is a component on its own, which has its own logic, its own structure, and its own styling. Our sidebar has its own logic, structure, and styling, and our footer has its own logic, structure, and styling. When we bring in all these components together, we're going to form our full application, which is a complex one and a very complete application, right? So why do we use components? We talked about that. We say the components, we use components because components are reusable. We use components for its reusability. We use components because it is easy to maintain. For example, if I have my header and I have my header in my home page, my profile page, in my chat page, all I need to do is to modify or change or maintain the header components, and it's going to affect every other pages where the header is being used. So it makes our code maintainable, scalable, and reusable. Those are the three basic examples of the importance of using components. Now we're going to look at the different components, the type of components we have in React. Of course, we mentioned that we have the class component and the functional component. So one of the type of components we're going to talk about is the class component. So the class component is very simple and modern. It uses functions to return JSX. By this time, we already know what JSX means. If you're still confused, go back to our previous videos where we talked about JSX and rendering JSX. So we say the class components returns JSX in our web application. It is very simple and it is a modern way of writing our components, right? If you see from here, we have a function that is returning a button function that is returning a JSX. This is exactly what we discussed when we talked about JSX. It's returning a button, which is a button, and it has closing and opening button, opening and closing tag. So this is a typical example of a class component, of a functional component, right? So let's not mistake this. This is supposed to be a functional component. So let's look at what a class component looks like, which is a different type of a component. A different type of component. We have the class component, right? This is what the class component looks like. The class component is of course an older React style. It uses ES6 classes, which includes lifecycle methods, right? If you look at this, the React class component is rendering JSX, right? We have the render keyword in a class component. So these are the two types of components we're going to encounter in this series, and we're going to make use of one for consistency's sake. We're going to go ahead with functional components throughout this series. It is almost the same thing as class components. You can check out other of our series when we start talking about class components. Now we've understood basically what components are, types of components we have. We say the React components are building blocks for our applications. We talked about the two types of components, the functional components, which is the modern, and the class component, which is the older. We're going to talk about, in our next video, we're going to see how we can create different kinds of components in our Visual Studio Code or in our cursor. We're going to see how to create button components, div components, and different kind of components, and we're going to see how to render them in our web page, right? So in the next video is going to be a practical video. We're going to see how to create all these components, and from there we'll go over to props and every other different concepts in React.js. Of course, guys, if you're finding this series helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out any of our new videos.